Hello and welcome to the Hands Up If You're Human podcast, an ongoing series of conversations dedicated to exploring and celebrating the messy reality of being human. The truth is there is nothing any of us can think, say, do or experience that isn't 100% human. So it's time to drop the shame and the guilt, accept everything that we are and start working to create the lives we really want to live. My name is Wyndham, I am the Blueprint Coach, and it is my great pleasure to introduce to you someone who I think everybody has people in their lives who come into their life at a particular time that in hindsight you can see as a massive inflection point. And this is one of those people for me. She's a yoga teacher, a transformational soul coach, a multidimensional success coach, an Atlantean master teacher, an ancestral and early influences expert, a bringer of what the fuck moments, and the author of StarPeace 101, How to Create Peace in One Generation. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce you all to the singular, the wonderful Rosanna Hanness. How are you, Rosanna?
That was probably the best intro I've ever had. That was awesome. Thank you, Wyndham. Wow.
You're very welcome. I meant every word of it, although I didn't understand many of the words in it. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really pleased to be here, actually. I really am. It's I actually had a podcast this morning I was recording that I completely forgot I had. Joy. And I think last week I was like, it'd be great to do some podcasts. And then out of nowhere, here you are going, can I please invite you onto my podcast? So hello, love the magic and the manifesting.
Lovely. Thank you very much for being here. We will get to StarPeace 101. But what I want to do this season is all about finding your freedom. So my first question to you is, what does that mean to you?
You know what? This was coming through for me last night. I think in the middle of the night, I was like, oh, Wyndham, freedom. What does freedom mean? I feel like more than anything, finding your freedom means being able to accept the things you cannot change, the courage to change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Serenity Prayer 101.
That's interesting, because that is a really concise perspective on freedom. Yeah, well, it's interesting because I'm asking everybody that question, and I've had lots of different answers, including I've no idea. But that is super clear. How long has that been your perspective?
As again, wow, I love the questions. Well, I was part of when I was a teenager, I was bulimic for a little while. Classic overeater is a sort of first issue with trying to self-medicate, if you like, in this world, feeling very, very sensitive, not realizing I was an empath and I was sensitive to the suffering in the world. So yes, at 14, I found myself in this position, and someone actually spotted me and suggested that I might benefit from the 12-step program. So I was in Overeaters Anonymous for a good year of my life, but very, very diligently. And I was going to 3 meetings a week. I was also in a band at the time. This is when I lived in Singapore. And I remember like this was part of their whole thing, right? And it was like another part of it was about accepting that this is something you have no power over, that you're a victim to it, that you kind of have to surrender to a higher power. And I've kind of taken the best and left the rest with that whole program, which is another story in itself. But I do remember looking around going, looking at everyone thinking, am I going to be doing this for the rest of my life? Am I going to be coming to this many meetings? Is this my life? Am I really not able to overcome it? And I'm not bulimic. I haven't been bulimic. I haven't even thought about that since I was about 16, I think was the last relapse I had. And it's just not something that's in my energy anymore. It's not something that I do. It doesn't mean I haven't found other ways to self-medicate over time. And I think we all need to be honest and accept that in this world, we have a little bit of a dopamine thing going on that's like we like to go towards pleasure and avoid pain. And we're learning more and more about that as we make the shift as humans, I believe, from being wired to survive to being wired to thrive. But that serenity prayer landed then, and it has kind of been seeded through everything. It's actually part of one of the star maps as well that I teach as part of my book. And I remember another pivotal moment for me was when I was 21. I read a book on pregnancy yoga because I was pregnant, and it was a very, very old pregnancy yoga book. And I remember in that book it said, as you change your view of the world around you changes. And these were the two things that kind of like were like, oh, okay, so what is in my control to change I'm interested in? What isn't I'm interested in? And for me, freedom is the ability to accept what is in my power and what isn't, and therefore to do what I can about what is in my power and to surrender what isn't.
That's amazing, because that to me is the encapsulation of surrender the outcome.
Yeah.
I've got a little note right in front of me that just says process, not product or outcome in everything. Because I have found myself constantly looking forward and kind of going, I should be more successful than I am. Why don't I have this? Why don't I have that? What I really want is this. And it only ever creates suffering and slows you down.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, you've just mentioned, I mean, I love this because I just love the way these things work, but you've just mentioned step 6 of my 6 co-creation steps star map, which is I run several courses, and the one called Fearless, Loved Up and Limitless. This is the 6 steps that I take people through, whether it's one-to-one or group. And 6th step is self-mastery. Own your desire fully. Like, it's one thing to not own it, in which case it's a bit of spiritual bypassing, right? You've got to own what you want. What would you really like the outcome to be? What are you excited about? What does it feel like? What is it? And at the same time, surrender that outcome to the highest good of all and the win-win-win and everything. I know we've talked about that before, and divine timing, which I'm actually facing something presently where I'm like, why isn't this selling? Why aren't people doing this? Why aren't they jumping on board this amazing thing that I've downloaded that's great, that I'm sure everyone will love? And the guides are just saying, trust the timing, trust the timing. I'm like, doesn't make sense to me right now, but it will later.
Yeah.
It will.
Yeah. And so you've said a few things already. Right off the bat, you said, when I asked you what finding your freedom means, you said, well, I was coming through, I had something coming through yesterday when I was thinking about it. And you've just said about divine timing and all these things. When we first met, I was ready for a change, but my old blueprint, my certainty about what I thought I believed, my certainty about what I thought to be true, my external judgment of the things I was afraid of. And essentially, I think fear is that kind of, when our truths and beliefs are threatened, those are our stabilizers.
Mm.
And so the stability of the world around us is under threat when somebody tells us something that is outside of our sphere of kind of certainty. And meeting you, I went to one of your yoga classes in Croydon, because it was the only other yoga class I could find at the time I could practice in Croydon. That is why I went. A diary alignment. And in my first class with you, you started talking about crystalline grids. And my old blueprint went, what the fuck is she talking about? And I remember feeling like I had a choice. And the choice was, I can dismiss all of this and carry on the path I had been on, which I knew created misery for me, or I could sit there and try to find something in what you were saying that I could get my fingertips onto. So crystalline grids is one I will carry with me forever. I still don't know what they are, but these kind of things, channeling, divine timing, crystalline grids, I'm not going to ask you to explain what they all are necessarily, but how long has that type of thing been in your life?
I'm laughing because if you can hear these, I've got this many crystals in my pockets right now.
That's what I thought. You were just money bags chinking around.
Desk, they're everywhere. So, okay, with the crystal piece, my mum was a crystal healer, but she did not become a crystal healer until I left home when I was 16. So we lived in Singapore for 3 years, and I was blessed to come back to England to private education. I've had it, different types of education all around the world. So I'm very blessed to have had the experience of international education, private education in this country, state education in 3 different countries. So I've got a very broad perspective of how things are taught to us and how perception affects reality, right? And
Right.
as you say, I mean, I'll never forget when you showed up in my own class and then you came again. I was like, I never thought I was going to see him again. Like, you know, it's always that, okay. And, you know, you trust, I believe we have these soul connections, right? So what keeps someone coming back, even if you never expect it? We have a soul connection, you and I. We've known each other in other lifetimes. That's how I'd say it. But what I'm getting to is my mum was very blocked spiritually all of my life. Like I had, as a 4-year-old, I'd walk around basically looking at the world and the adults going, why does everyone look sick and miserable? And why is the energy so heavy? And I didn't have a concept of what that was, right? But that's how I felt. I also had an absolute abject terror of death and being nothing, just being cut off, right?
Right.
Now, as a 12-year-old and 11, 12-year-old, so this precursor to obviously the eating disorder, I used to wake up and cry every day, just empty pit in my stomach, depressed, was bullied at every school I went to, in Greece for being English, in England for being Greek or being from the wrong village or not the right catchment area. I mean, Oxfordshire, really narrow-minded energy. And so by the time I kind of got to 13, 14, I was really naughty, really wild. You know, my parents did not really listen to us and what we wanted and needed. And because I'd never really had that being heard and being validated, I started smoking, drinking, having sex when I was 13 years old. I was really young. By 14, I was sneaking out. I was doing all sorts of things. Do you know what I mean? And really getting into trouble in a very safe country, thank goodness, right? But mum and I did not really get on until I left home. And I was lucky to go, as I said, to sixth form in England. My sister also left at the time. She was 14. And we both came back to England. So mum went from running cookery classes and teaching people how to make things that weren't really, you know, just not really something of substance, right? Is all I can say, because she hadn't tapped into her spirit. But when she found this teacher that I started to go to when I was in Singapore, this was thanks to a mutual friend. So they could see, like some of my mum's friends, she met some spiritually open people. They could see I was not in a good place. And it was suggested I went to this woman for some rebirthing sessions. And this was when I was 14. And that really paved the way for me to understand the impact of our time in the womb and our birth and how that shapes us in our early life. Anyway, I was going to planetary healing meditations at age 15, 16. Have to say thanks to my mum, super supportive, would take us, drive us everywhere, all the rest of it. But it was only when we left that she got involved with this woman, Senna Wafer, who now lives in Australia, amazing woman. Long story short, mum got really into everything. She trained in Reiki, she trained in sacred psychology, she did all sorts of stuff and went heavily into crystal healing. Now, she's not with us in physical anymore. She passed 16 years ago nearly now. But all her crystals, if you saw my office, it's like, I am like the Aladdin's cave of crystals, right? So although I didn't understand I had a connection with them the way I do, I'm an intuitive with crystals. I know them. I just know them. So this is where Atlantis does tie in. And anything, you know me, as much as I'll say the most woo-woo shit out there,
Yeah.
bit of me that's going, what the fuck? Like, where did that, like, you know, the human and
This is
soul.
this is one of the things that I love about you is that you're absolutely embodied, and this is not, oh, I've got this idea. This is like, this is it. And at the same time, you have the awareness to recognize, like, what the wow. And so as someone who came to you originally as all of what you say is challenging me very deeply. And now, however many years later, it still challenges me, but in a different way. It's like, all right, I've found my finger holds, and I remember sitting in classes with you, and you'd be talking, and I'd be there going, okay, what she's all over there, I'm here. What do I think? If I translated that into my English, what do I think that is? And I would find these little incremental steps. And the fact that you can stand there or sit there and just say, look, I get it. I understand how out there this sounds for someone who has been brought up the way I was brought up. and most people are, heavily conditioned, really narrow-minded, terrified of what we don't know, and yet not really that inquisitive about what we think we do know. I think it is a really approachable way, for me anyway. I think it's remarkable. Sorry, I felt the need to interrupt you, but I completely derailed it.
No, you're spot on. And I think this is the point, is we have to, I have my take on things. And one of the hardest things for me to accept is that I'm very ahead of the time. I don't mean that in a elitist way.
Yeah.
But like, if you look at what's popular online, the kind of spirituality that's popular these days, I'm like, really? That's like a long time ago. We're here now. Especially when we talk about the Thrive paradigm and we talk about creating 5D reality. So, moving beyond law of attraction as The Secret or What the Bleep, which were, movies that came out a long time ago, 15, 20 years ago now. And that shaped many of us at the time to be aware of the fact that reality is not as we've been told it is. And every one of us has been programmed to be who we are. Like, the first thing I'll say to my clients, you're not who you think you are. Who you think you are is who you've been programmed to be, right? Your soul isn't activated yet in your body. And that's a whole journey in itself. And many people will spend their whole lives never activating their soul consciousness. And actually, there's another caveat here, which is we've had this whole split between science and religion, and many people conceive spirituality to be religion. So if you're spiritual or you're connected to your soul, or God forbid, divine, that means that you must be an advocate of one of the major religions that are all patriarchal religions. And that's a limited mindset of what it means to be soul connected. I'm not saying it's wrong. I feel the divine speaks in many different ways. And anyway, we could go down that rabbit hole. But I think the main point is that when you decide to be heart-centered and soul activated, life gets really interesting. And that's the point.
Yeah, it does. But it's interesting when you say the language we use is so powerful. But I think one of the big lessons I learned was the way I use language is mine. And that there's this big space between the language you use, the intent created by your soul that passes through your understanding and use of language, that comes out of your mouth, that then travels a distance to my ears, goes through my filters, and I don't know the intent that started it. So I'll sit there and you'll talk divine. I go, yeah, I think I grew up in a Christian household. I understand what that means. And spiritual is, as you said, it's so easily construed with religion that having the ability to almost dip the clutch on my language and so like, okay, let me just disconnect here. And how do I get to understand what this person intends me to understand, rather than I'm going to apply my definitions to everything they're saying, at which point, of course, it sounds crazy.
Look, we're living in a world where there's so much conflict and war based on what you're talking about, misunderstanding, misinterpretation. One of the first things in this book, and I have to thank Kate who edited it, is a glossary, which I don't even like the word. I was like, glossary, who puts a glossary in a book?
And for those people listening, this is StarPeace 101, Rosanna's new book. But let's talk about that. Sorry, you're talking about there's a glossary.
Yeah, it's called Translation of StarPeace Lingo into Human Terms. And in brackets, it says glossary. Because I was like, I don't want a glossary. She's like, you need to have a glossary. People don't know what you're talking about. And apparently, quite a few of the guys who are reading the book, we had one guy say, oh, I love the glossary. I keep coming back to it to go, oh, what does this mean again in relation to what I'm saying? Because I figured if we want to stop misunderstanding, the first thing we really want to appreciate is that when people are having a conversation, say in the pub or on a WhatsApp group about something that's going on in the world, we're all presuming we've had access to the same information, same level of understanding, same source. And no, we haven't. If you hear the news in New Zealand, if you hear it in Greece, if you hear it in Timbuktu, it's different. And the way people are portrayed is by design. And we're all given different information. Like we say, divine, what does that mean? Well, I'll give you my definition. Someone else will give you theirs. The other element is I know I'm a clairsentient and a cognizant, which if you're new to these kind of terms, they're in the
I
book.
am.
They're in the book. So
Okay.
you've heard of clairvoyant, right?
Yes.
So a clairvoyant is someone who can see beyond the eyes. They've got an inner vision. You've got clairaudient. So that the booming voice in my head that got me to write this book, that was a clairaudient message.
Mm.
But I was always claircognizant and I was always clairsentient, which means I knew things without knowing why. I'm that annoying know-all. Ask my husband. He's like, I'm always right except when you're around. You know? And then clairsentient is when you sense things, you feel things, and you just know. You just know. And women have that. I mean, women, there's more and more science coming out now. I'm a huge fan of Bruce Lipton as an example, and I'd recommend everyone checks him out. I usually have his interview that I did with him on the top of my YouTube channel. It's currently being SEO'd, so it'll be back up there shortly. But basically, he explained that in terms of chromosomes, for example, like your mum has your chromosomes in her body, right?
Mm-hmm.
She knows if something's happened to you. It's in her body. She'll feel it, right? And, you know, we've always said mums have this sixth sense. Yes, they do, but they also have a biological connection, which is why you could be on the other side of the world. And when we do start to see this and it's explained to us, the weird woo-woo stuff isn't so weird anymore, right? It makes sense. It's just we haven't had the science, we haven't had the studies done to confirm these things. And when they have been done, that which is published is only what's serving the current narrative. Otherwise, it's, you know, not out there yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love it because it's so I'm open to hearing anything now. Is that true? I think that's true. And you said something earlier about the 12-step program that you took the best bits and left the rest. And I think it's such an important way. I think it's a super empowering way to create change in our lives. You do not have to accept 100% of what somebody is saying. And the alternative isn't rejecting 100%. It's where can you find something that makes sense, that feels like it's moving you forward. And then you create your own patchwork of what works for you. And over time, you get to replace some of the patches as actually it was good for me then, but actually I'm a little bit past that. I think when we spoke last week very briefly, we were talking about labels and the how we talk about things to a beginner is a necessary oversimplification, because there's no way in a million years, had you been talking StarPeace 101 5, 6, 7 years ago when we met, would I have stayed in the room? I don't know. But it is that kind of, can we work in increments to help people move? And you mentioning that some of the guys who are reading your book, the glossary, it's a really useful tool because it's like, okay, wait a minute, is my understanding of the language what's intended? Let me just flick back and find, it's not. Okay, so my instant reaction is invalid because that's not what you mean.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So did you ever have to take a leap of faith into this?
Every day.
Okay.
They give me instructions. I'm like, oh, fuck off. Some days I wake up, I'm like, nah, duvet day. Don't want to deal with this right now. And I mean, like I said, so here's an interesting synchronicity, right? Is this morning I was on another podcast. So it's called May the Force Be With You, and it's all about life force energy. And the lady's introducing me about, and she's talking about shining brightly like a star. And like this event that I've been seeking to get off the ground, I'm like, what isn't happening with this? It's called Shine Like the Star That You Are. And I'm like, she's pulling it out of my energy field, right?
Yeah.
And this is the thing, is we're carrying our story. I was speaking to another amazing woman called Julie Gerland a couple of days ago, who is a fellow birth worker. She's 20 years ahead of me in terms of, you know, her life and what she's been doing. We've got very similar parallels. And she was saying that basically we carry our womb story around with us all the time. The way we see the world is through the view of the womb, which basically means imagine your mum as a periscope. and we were in the submarine, right?
Mhm.
And so the way mum perceives the world as she's growing us is basically influencing how we perceive the world. Is it safe? Is it dangerous? Are we more sympathetic nervous system dominant, which just about everybody in this world is? We're addicted to stress hormones, not love hormones, unless you were brought up in the jungle well away from everything because of the world that we live in, right? So we're wired to survive, not thrive, which means the hindbrain is more developed than the neocortex for most of us. Unless you're really well supported, never had to worry about anything, lived in a nice, remote space. This is the reality for most. You then have birth trauma, you have early separation in terms of we were all taught, don't create a rod for your own back, leave the baby to cry, don't pick it up all the time, all these stories which have actually increased our cortisol levels and set them for life. Like we're dealing with a lot of epigenetic trauma, which means trauma that's passed from one generation to the next and never been dealt with. So when we talk about the snowflakes, forgive me for saying this because it's not our generation, but
Yeah.
the very not so robust generation presently that has a label for everything, it's important for us to remember that they are dealing with the legacy of our unprocessed trauma from at least 4 generations ago, never mind more than beyond that. But let's just go with the world wars as an example, right? How many kids did not actually, was the child that this dad thinks it's his kid, but it isn't. If this happened here, I had another family over there. All the stories that are in our blood, in our stories, they're there, right? So for us to overcome this, we have to remember that the world as we know it, the leaders of the world today, whether they're evil, Knievel or not, the majority have serious trauma they have never dealt with. And they're the people we're listening to. They're the policy decision makers. They're not very well. Forgive me for saying that.
No, you don't need forgiveness.
Right? But we have to really look at this and say, what would happen if everyone dealt with their birth story? What if everyone understood the impact of their birth and their time in the womb and their conception, the first 7 years of life? What if we all had that opportunity to spend some time with it, as I did when I was a teenager? Would that actually change then? One, what we do, how we see the world, how we show up with challenges, and what is peace as well? I feel it's so important for us to address that because I feel subconsciously, because we are overall addicted to adrenaline and stress hormones, people have this subconscious fear of peace, that it means boring, it means stale, and it means there's no purpose to live anymore because we're not struggling to survive.
Yeah.
But we don't need to. We're here to be programmed to thrive now so that we don't have to struggle. We can grow and expand and refine and define and have a different experience of being in a physical body. Sounds way more exciting to me right now.
Yeah, wow. It's because when you're talking about world leaders, I'm constantly seeing and concerned by the almost deification of, tech billionaires or billionaires in general, and then the tech billionaires. And you look at these people and you kind of go, I mean, what was your life like? Even if pre-birth, post-birth, what kind of a life did you have that has meant you're so craving to fill whatever gap there is, and your way of doing it is power and money? And then interestingly, talk as I hear you talk about the kind of, I can't remember how you refer to it, but the pre-birth stuff as we're being grown. When I first heard you talk about that, my old blueprint set off the clarion. But I sat there and I thought about it, and it was, well, if we are all energy, which we are, I could get to there. We're all energy. All energy resonates. So if the energy I am being grown in is resonating in a certain way, of course that's going to affect me. Of course it is. How can it not? And then if you take the step further back, so, well, in that case, the energy that was present while my mother was being grown. So that's how I kind of found my way to, all right, I'm open to this. How do we solve it? Sorry.
Can I tell you a really interesting story that I think does totally encapsulate this, right? So you met me in Croydon. Now, you tell me how many people set foot at East Croydon Station and go, I've got to live here.
Yeah.
Not many.
Yeah.
But my story is that I wanted to have a child very early in my life, from the age of 8. So I believe we have different level soul missions. Like, we have sort of first level. When we fulfill that, we then get the option to go to the next level, etc. And these soul missions are born from a deep longing, often from an unmet need, right, in this life. But that's not that's one of the precursors, actually a soul thing, but there's a human thing as well. So my unmet needs as a child made me want to have a baby so I could love a baby and give it all the love that I didn't get. Yeah, that I felt I didn't get, even though I came from very loving parents. Nothing wrong with them, just not very emotionally mature. And I'd had a traumatic birth. I was born bum first with the cord around my neck twice. It was a vaginal birth. That's what they were doing in 78. Probably better than cesarean, to be fair, for lots of reasons. However, the point is, it was not easy. And my memory of it is that I felt like I was dying before the doctor freed me, because I had the cord around my neck as well, and I was born. And it's interesting that my journey took me to have my daughter. And I was so scared of giving birth, the pain of giving birth, but there's actually a deeper fear of dying. So I wanted a home birth. I was 22 to get ready to give birth, 21 when I got pregnant. Hired a private midwife, had a birthing pool. Labour was not progressing. My baby's head didn't even engage in the pelvis. So I had a 4-day labour. Monday afternoon it started. She was born on Thursday lunchtime, so 3.5 days.
Wow.
Long and short of that one is that I had to transfer in for what was going to be an emergency cesarean. As soon as we got to the hospital and changed hands, because the story is my mum had an epidural. My memory of that is that the moment she did, her natural hormone connection to me was shut down. So I felt like the curtains had closed in the womb and I was screaming for my life, trying to get out, couldn't get out. This is how I remember it from rebirthing. So I didn't want to have an epidural. I wanted to stay connected to my baby, right? But I'd psychologically prepared for the birth. My cellular memory, though, was not safe. I'd hired a hypnotherapist, a midwife, all the team. However, none of the team had had a natural birth. I didn't even know that. My hypnotherapist had a daughter. I discover halfway through our session she's adopted. I was like, it's not helping, right? So,
Right.
you know, I've hired a team that don't know how to help me feel safe in natural birth. So I don't actually relax and the head doesn't engage until I go into hospital facing my worst nightmare. I've had pethidine at this point and sleeping tablets. I'm now going for an epidural because actually when we do get into the hospital, her heart rate calms down. So I just needed some sleep, then I birthed her. Now, my memory of all of this is I've now had a traumatic birth. Very soon after my daughter was born, a few months later, I go to Croydon with her father. I'm like, oh my God, I have to move here. Like, we lived in New Malden at the time. And we moved there very soon after we split up. There was all sorts of stuff going on with him, including alcohol misuse, and he was mental health issues I just didn't know how to deal with at the time, and I was very young. Anyway, I'm now a single mum on benefits, fallen from grace, university graduate, like what's going on in my life. Get this impulse to train as a yoga teacher. I'm in South Croydon. My granddad tells me that this is where he's from. I'm 3/4 Greek. I thought my only English bit of blood was from Streatham, because that's where they lived.
Mhm.
Actually, it's specifically from South Croydon. He was a Bernardo's boy. I then, as trained as a yoga teacher, get all these pregnant women coming to me. I'm like, well, I need to do some specialist training because I don't know how to deal with these ladies. So then embark on this specialist training, which led me to then create, like, I was the pregnancy yoga teacher you went to in Croydon at the time, baby yoga, etc. Then I get involved with Croydon University Hospital to be an interface between the women that are birthing, the stories they're telling me, and they had something called the Maternity Services Liaison Committee there. So I was a user rep, then I became the co-chair and then the chair. Well, guess what? My mum's older brother was a stillborn at that hospital. And I spent 10 years working with that hospital to help turn it around from one of the worst performing units in the country to one of the best maternity units. That happened between 2004 and 2014.
Wow.
Then finally I get spat out of Croydon. I couldn't leave before then. It was like I kept trying to go, but I couldn't. My work was done there. And that was where Enjoy Yoga, so you remember me from then, I was like, I had to accept I wasn't enjoying it anymore. I was like, what's going on? I'm working my ass off. I've got no money. Everyone loves what I'm doing, but I'm broke. Where's the joy? What's going on? And that was when I experienced my first cacao ceremony. And I had this dialogue with Mama Cacao. I mean, chocolate. I remember when I got invited, I was like, what am I going to get from a chocolate ceremony? I smoke weed. I do this. I do that. You know, like, how am I going to get from this? Well, what did I get? I had a dialogue with the cacao diva, and she basically, I said, what's the deal? I've got no joy. She's like, well, that's because you're trying to take people's pain away. I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? She's like, you're trying to help people manage pain, not take it away. You don't need to take it away from them. Teach them how to move through it, then they won't fear it. Ah, what's this all called then? What's my new venture? RozyGlow. That started that. From that, I then go into emotional mental detox coaching. This was when all my personal journey came up and all the relationship stuff I do came up, and I got together with my lovely man. And then once my personal wants and needs had actually been taken care of, this was when StarPeace could land. So you see what I'm saying about how you can be your genes will take you where you need to go. That like the stories follow where you're guided. It's all laid out.
Oof. That's so that requires at least part of us to accept that, right? That acceptance piece of actually you're going to be taken to the places you need to go, whether physical locations or emotional places or spiritual, whatever it might be. This is all ready to unfold for you. I think we also, when we spoke last week, spoke about, and maybe it didn't, regardless. I think so many of us are trying to play the checkmate move first. And it's like, well, it doesn't work that way. That's not how the game is played. You have to set the board. And you're not doing it on your own. Somebody is playing against you. And I'm not saying that we move through life and there's all this force against us, but there are forces working in our life that will bounce us one way or bounce us another way. And having the acceptance, the surrender to this is all part of it.
Mm.
What is the lesson in this moment that allows me to move forward?
Mm.
Again, is another one of those big moments for me over the last couple of years, really, that has been, you don't get to just skip to the good part. You can't do that. You have to go. And even as I say that, catching myself saying good part, it's like they're all just parts.
Mm.
And we learn from each part, or we don't. And if we don't, well, that lesson gets retaught.
Yeah.
And retaught.
Yeah.
And retaught. I was out for a walk earlier, and I've started essentially we live in ancient woodland, or our house backs onto ancient woodland. So within 10 seconds, I can leave the house and be surrounded by trees that are hundreds of years old. And I've recently started, as I walk out of our back gate, just kind of going, all right, I'm here for some advice, guys. This is what I'm dealing with. And I was doing that today. And eventually I just suddenly went, oh, okay. Because I don't like the answer. I had that realization today. It's like, well, there's a reason I keep asking this fucking question. It's because I'm resisting the answer. And actually, if I just accept what is and then work from there rather than, yeah, but I'd rather that it wasn't that. I would much prefer it be this.
Mm.
And the universe is kind of there going, oh, well, it isn't that. So what are you going to do with that?
Mm. Mm.
Oh,
And with the universe is you speaking back to you
yeah.
from that higher perspective that's going, yeah, let's get you a little bit here and a little bit there. Because even what you were saying, I mean, first thing I was going to say is, do you know what types of trees you've got in that ancient woodland?
There's some oak, there's some birch. I think there's some beech.
So look up the spiritual meaning. When we're done, just look up the spiritual meaning of each of these types of trees, because there's a message in that for you as well. You're going to them, you're asking for guidance. And that's beautiful. That's so humble, right? Like, this is the thing for us as humans to get, that our brains do not have all the freaking answers. Of course they don't. They're computers. They will only ever produce more of the past, which is why we keep recreating the past, looking slightly different, right? Without even going into whether there's genuinely evil people on this planet today or not. Let's just say they're birth traumatized, or they're certainly so traumatized from their early life that, as you say, they call them technocrats, the billionaires, the people that are kind of controlling things, are coming from severe lack wounding, right? We have to accept that. I mean, George Soros, I think, is a good example of this. I think I've got the right guy. You know, he was passed off as a Christian. So he was Jewish, but he was passed off as a Christian. I think he had a German uncle or something like that. So he was going round in the concentration camp he was in, picking out all the gold and all of the bits from his basically tribe, right? So he really learned the me first, everyone else second, sort of survival of the fittest element. And it's not true, by the way. We've been taught that that is how we've evolved. But if you do ever get a chance to check out Bruce Lipton's book, Spontaneous Evolution, he lays it all out beautifully and explains that's really not the way it is. It's the species that chose to cooperate that actually the ones that survived, right? And we're learning to thrive now. So when we actually look at this from the context of highest self, of getting guidance, of who is it we're actually listening to, what is it all about, all of that kind of thing, there's a lot there to unpack. And when we're ready for the next bit, we'll receive it. But until we are, we're not. Now, part of my book, I talk about this, and you don't even need to buy the book for this bit. If you go to StarPeaceConsciousness.com, it's all laid out there. This idea that there's a manifesto for a new idea, a new way we could live. And it's not even like, it's just flipping around some of the things going on in the world today and seeing them in a different way. Like, you know, what if our doctors were also no, let's just say our beauticians are also therapists, and you know, you're just kind of tying things in such a way where our teachers teach us about conscious union and, you know, self-respect and things like that. So we're just taking things beyond what we know. There's also the imagery of how the game of life has changed, because up until now we have been living in a dualistic universe. You're absolutely spot on. That's what Star Wars is about. Good versus evil in ourselves, you know, the angel and the devil, right? But the visual I was given was that the hand of the divine wipes away the chessboard and basically in place of the chessboard just dumps a load of puzzle pieces and says, we're playing a new game now. The new game is, let's create the Paradise Earth puzzle. So everyone's a piece of the puzzle. We all have a piece of that puzzle in our heart. That's our divine spark getting activated. And our role isn't to try and create the whole puzzle, because we're just one bloody piece of it. All we have to do is look for our adjoining puzzle pieces, which are the ones that fit nicely with us. We're not going to change the mind, or anything that's on the other side of the board is going to look like it doesn't belong, right? If you've got blue sky and grass here, it's going to look like it doesn't make sense. But when you see it from that broader picture, it does.
Yeah.
Peace doesn't mean we all see things exactly the same way. It doesn't mean that we all sing the same, well, we sing the same tune, but in different ways.
Yeah.
We talked about this, and we talked about how you've got different instruments playing different octaves. You've got, you know, everything going on. Even discord has its place.
Yeah. An orchestra doesn't all play the same note at the same time, or rarely. Yeah.
Exactly. So when we allow the diversity and this idea of unity and diversity and curiosity, when we replace curiosity or judgment with curiosity, and we start to lean into the discomfort of having different points of view without the intention of making one right and one wrong, but actually really seeking to understand more about what we don't understand. And I heard this a while ago, which I thought was really interesting. When two shamans meet for the first time, they kind of circle around each other and kind of talk to hear each other and what they know and what they don't know, to establish who is further understanding of certain areas and who is of others. And then they can establish where they are in this and what the connection's about. So, you know, I'm an expert in certain areas, you're an expert in others. let's use your example of being a blueprint coach. You're a blueprint coach, right? So I talk about activating one's soul blueprint. And I talk about that from the perspective of my soul had an idea of what it came to this earth to do. It chose its curriculum. We don't all have the same curriculum. What you just said before, the same lesson will come up again and again and again until you learn it. And then you learn it on this level and you encounter it on the next level in a different way. So we're not going round and round in circles. We're going up a mountain, spiraling. We keep coming to the same part, but from a different point of view. And we're learning, right? So when you look at it from this perspective, and people are always like, well, is life fated? Or is it, is everything free will? It makes sense to me that as a soul incarnating, I know, I've learned from experience that things get confusing on this plane. So I was going to put several things in place to give myself the best chance possible to make sure that I learn these key things to trigger what I'm really here to do, right? We've all done that for ourselves. Those are key milestones, right? Fated events. There's a lot of free will within all of this, right? And it's about recognizing, in many ways, as we evolve, we become less concerned with free will because we know we have a destiny we've chosen for ourselves, and we just want to remember what that is, because our soul isn't pious, wanting us to live on mung beans and green tea for the rest of our lives. Certainly not my soul, anyway. What it does want us to do is to have the most graceful and joyful and easeful experience of fulfilling this mission. So I think I said to you, I was a real wild child in my childhood, well, teen days. I'm a balance of light and dark. I need to have fun while I'm on this planet. That's what I'm about. But I also have to know what suits me today, because yesterday was different, right? So what's my balance today? What have I outgrown? What doesn't serve me anymore? And again, just coming back to what we were saying at the start about, addictions and 12-step programs, I was fortunate that I had not been bulimic for many years. It was not a situation that was taking lots and lots of undoing, right? And I'm not someone that, let's just say, if you are an alcoholic and you have one drink and then you go crazy and you're going to drink drive and put other people at risk, that's a different story, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's very important for us to appreciate our starting point, and also, again, what's in our control and what isn't. But the more we accept that our higher power is our highest self and the divine is source, however we conceive that to be, it's the frequency of love. And love sometimes is tough and sometimes gentle, and it's all these other things, right? We get to play and to have as much fun as we can. And if we let ourselves experience life this way and recognize that our personal wants and needs are part of our soul mission, not separate, this helps to define everything, because it's pretty unfathomable, really. How are we going to understand the universe?
Yeah. And that I think is the almost the beacon of light that shines for me, is that why wouldn't we want that? Irrespective of the language you're using and your intention, my understanding, all those kind of things. Love at the heart of it. Love is the heart of everything. Why wouldn't we want that? Fun, joy. Why wouldn't we want that? Peace, not in this kind of boredom. Oh, there's no purpose. Why wouldn't we want that? And if your life isn't that, then how can you open yourself up to these ideas? Because that's where I found myself, was I know if I go back, I know what that feels like. I don't want that. I want this idea of joy and peace and love, and and as complicated and as unfathomable and deeply resisted, I'm still overwriting some of those blueprint pieces. I'm fascinated by this idea of a soul incarnation to learn lessons. I don't think we have time on that, but I definitely want to talk to you about that at some point. I'm fascinated by these things because 10 years ago it would have been, yeah, whatever, move on. But what I'm finding is the more I can recognize my own judgment and recognize that it's driven from a place of fear of instability and uncertainty, and recognize that, well, that is there is uncertainty. That's like a base state. Then it gives me permission to explore things. I'm very conscious of our time. We're not at the end of our time yet, but I do want to ask you a question on freedom.
Yeah, sure.
What is something you repeatedly find yourself needing to free yourself from?
My hedonistic tendencies. Let's not repeat. It's like, Rosie, you know that's not the best choice for you right now. Yeah, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's fun. And I think it's, you know, I'm blessed. Look, I see life in such a way. My mum died when she was 60, right? She was not the smoking, drinking. I mean, she did like to have a drink, but she's got a twin brother who chain smokes. He's now 75 or 76. You know, he's still alive. He's here. And I think we can all live our lives trying to be the best version we can. But if we're constantly in trying and judgment, right, we're missing a trick, because some of that, you know, when you look at people in the same way that these days food is being reduced to fuel that is either fat or carbohydrate, right? And you kind of see it in that way. We can reduce our energy down to, are we raising the frequency or reducing the frequency, or not really contributing one way or the other? And the more I am in joy, the more you are in joy, the more we are in peace and contentment, in fulfillment, in positivity, in gratitude, appreciation, the more we're contributing to that in the collective. This is what I mean about adjoining puzzle pieces and resonance and frequency. And this is a big part for me of the book and the three-pronged formula for peace, which I'm so passionate about, because it's like, we can actually create peace. We know how to do it. It's doable. All right. It's doable through our own individual actions, knowing that they impact others. And so if we recognize each of us as having a ripple effect, then what matters is feeding our own frequency. So what I have to remind myself every day to do, it's a bit like being a yoga teacher. You know, you just get on your mat for 5 minutes. Don't worry about the rest of it. Just get on for 5 minutes and make that connection. So my freedom depends on me remembering every day to plug in and switch on my soul light, to feed my energy to the center of the earth, to connect it to the crystalline grid through my earth chakra, to connect up to source and connect to the divine mind grid, so I'm not buying into the hive mind of the collective subconscious of humanity that's really low vibe. And then to, from my heart, connect out to the divine human heart grid and recognize that there are things in my control, but there's things that are not. Like, you know, I think this is a very important thing for people on an awakening journey to be aware of, is there's like victim consciousness as a first stage of awakening, where you realize you've got victim consciousness. You don't realize it until it's subtly pointed out to you, and not so subtly at other times. And I thank the teachers that pointed it out to me years ago. Then you have the empowerment piece, which for me, you know, this was going from Enjoy Yoga to RozyGlow, right? Oh, I can do these things and they impact my reality. And look, now I've cleared my subconscious programming and I'm no longer attracting the asshole men, and I've got this great husband and blah, blah, blah. And that was empowerment, and it was brilliant, and you're hitting your financial targets and you feel like you can control everything. And then another level comes in, and this is the level of surrender, when you realize it's not all in your control, actually. And what worked then doesn't work now, because actually it's about surrendering to what's for the best, what's for the highest good, not my will, but thy will. Thy will being highest for everyone. That's why I talk about win-win-win, you, me, and everyone involved, right?
Yeah.
And then from that, you have true like empowerment, true awakening coming up, when you can kind of just observe it and laugh at it like a Buddha, right? So I feel that this is really important, especially as we talk about the Thrive paradigm and what that means, because many people have a shocking relationship with money. You know, we've been taught these old paradigm beliefs, which have come since the World Wars, when people lost everything. I didn't tell you that bit of the story, but great granddad was a bank manager, and he was beheaded while my great grandmother was fleeing for her life. Maternal grandmother, pregnant with my grandmother at the time, maternal great grandmother. There's a whole thing there, and how that's impacted my choices and fears, etc. Right? So we're not all starting from the same place. I'm trigger happy, nervous system, fight, flight, freeze, like you wouldn't believe. but I've learning in this life, as is my daughter has. So the main thing really is for us to recognize that in the new world, we are operating from new concepts. We can't take old world thinking and apply it to the new world. So to me, an abundant, infinite supply means I can access whatever is required to fulfill this thing that is speaking to me as important. If it's for the highest good, it will work out. I align myself up, mind, body, soul, intention, do the bits I can, give it my best shot. If it's meant to, it will. If it isn't, it isn't. But you have to set the stage for it, right? And, you know, redefining our relationship with resources is important because it's all currency, whether it's money, whether it's time, whether it's love, attention, right? It's all currency. And it's like, what do we put our attention into? And is the world that we want to create one where there's no money? Or is it one where everyone has plenty, whatever that means? And therefore, instead of us all feeling like we have to earn a living, which is something we've been told is true, and therefore it creates our reality, our work can actually be tending to the environment, tending to each other, tending to continuing to grow and develop. And that's really important to me. And that is why StarPeace is the evolution of Star Wars. And it's why I care so much to talk about it, because I feel that when we see we can shift things, we might not know how right now, but through the power of our imagination and through us being really clear about what we don't want, we can then springboard to what we do want. And it's why I've learned that my work is to work with the few who influence the many, because if you deal with the top people, the people that are the 1% that are influencing everyone else, or near enough, that 10%, right? And especially through entertainment and through maternity services and child welfare and all the rest of it, you literally help people understand why these things are so important, and they change forever because it will actually be beneficial to them too. They might not think it is at the time because of the old thinking, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I could go on and on, but I think the important thing is to remember that you cannot create a new world from an old world mindset. So shifting that is important, and we're all very powerful. We just need to claim our power back.
Yeah, brilliant. And it is that I always ask the people I work with whenever they have a but it's always that kind of, okay, well, how's that working out for you?
Yeah.
Like, honestly, do you want more of this or do you want something different? Well, I want something different. Okay, well, you're going to have to change.
Yes.
There's the shit around you is still going to be there until you change. I have one more question. What is something at the end of lots and lots of podcasts, I hear people say, what's the one thing people should do? And I hate the question because there's loads of things people could do. So I'm asking everybody in this season, what is something somebody can do if they are feeling lost, stuck, or feel they need more freedom?
Okay. So I love the idea of just allowing to come through what's relevant right now for you and for everyone who's going to listen to this. So what's coming to my heart, I was going to say my mind, but to my heart, is to bring hands to this center, not the physical heart, but the heart center in terms of the energetics, and call in a miracle. So when I call in a miracle, that is a shift in perspective. For me, a miracle is a shift in perspective that allows the impossible to become possible because you see things differently. I'm not necessarily talking about raising the dead here, right? I'm talking about where it seems like there's no other option but what you see ahead of you. There's always something you haven't thought about, but you have to look at it from a different perspective. And maybe it's not your brain, it's going to be your soul that leads you. So hands on heart, call in a miracle, knowing that is a shift in perspective, and call in grace, because grace is the power of revelation, which allows us to let go of what no longer serves us. It allows us to have an epiphany, an aha moment that allows us to let go of what no longer serves us and to open to what does, to the infinite blessings that are always available, but we're just not tuned into them. And so when you call in a miracle and grace, you just give yourself a moment. You don't then go, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? But you've called it in. Hand over whatever's troubling you. Surrender to the highest good, the win-win-win. And go about your business. What's the next thing you need to do? You're hungry, go and eat some food. Got an email to answer, go do it. and just let it come back to you, because it will.
Ooh. Thank you so much, Rosanna. I have hugely enjoyed that. If people are interested in the work that you do, I'm sure people will be interested in the work that you do. This is going to go out early March.
Sweet.
So in the first week of March. So what have you got coming up with that timeline? Where can people find out more about you? Where can people get StarPeace 101?
All of that. Great. So StarPeace 101, How to Create Peace in One Generation by Rosanna Hanness and the StarPeace Collective, but you'll find it on Amazon by Rosanna Hanness, is available on Amazon worldwide. The most challenging place to get it at the moment as a paperback is Australia and Japan, but we're working on that. So there should be a hardback available hopefully by the end of March. I have 3 websites because I'm a multidimensional being of love and light, and one is never enough. So it very much depends on who you are and what you're doing. So as I said, I've kind of moved into working mainly one-to-one with leaders, pioneers, trailblazers, particularly in the entertainment industry because of the impact of that. But also anyone who feels a call to me, we have a soul connection. So let's just have a conversation, see what is. I have coaches that are now running my group coaching programs for me. I'm still involved, but I'm not the main coach. So depending on price point, basically, and where people are at. And obviously, we've got an online yoga membership where I teach twice a week live. We're going to have a very low cost membership coming out to do with the monthly moon meditations I do, which are actually co-creations and they're world service and personal healings. So what I would say is go to starpeaceconsciousness.com. That's like the best place to start, because on that website, it's just a one-page website. You'll see then that it describes the energizers, builders, and architects of the new earth. And depending on what you really identify with, it will then take you to the relevant website. All right. So that way we can then start a conversation, and feel free to reach out. I mean, I'm RozyGlow and StarPeace 101 on IG. I'm on TikTok, I'm on YouTube. RozyGlow is RoZyglow, so you'll generally find me that way. But in the book, I mean, like this, I can't recommend it enough, whether you're like, what is she talking about? Or you're really already in this. Like it takes, like generally my ideal clients are hyper independent. They don't feel they need me. Right. And I get it. That was me, right? And I'm like, let's just have a chat. Because you know that wall that's stopping you getting things you want. Let's have a chat about that, right? But in this book, I think it's chapter 40, gives you all, like takes you to sort of here's your next steps, as it were, right? So it's a really good activation manual, and it takes a lot for someone who's, if I'm working with someone, they've usually been working on themselves for a good 20 years or so, right? So it takes a lot to come to this point. And for anyone who's newer on the journey, they usually have had a massive awakening that they're like, I need to go to her, and they know it's me. And I'm not for everyone. I'm really not. So I've stopped even trying to make that feasible, right? So yeah, I mean, I can send you some links so obviously people can find me if they want. But
so I will put the starpeaceconsciousness.com. I'll put all your links actually in the show notes. I'm just going to make a note to remind myself to do that, but I will do that. I meant every word of the intro. Meeting you was a real inflection point, and it always reminds me of actually meeting you and Chris Abbey at that same point in my life. I'm always thinking about the saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I'm kind of caught in this place as like, well, no, the teachers are always there. It's when the student is ready, the kind of veil drops, and it's like, ta-da, we've always been here. You just weren't ready to see us. So I highly recommend anybody who is at a point where they can suspend their doubt and their uncertainty, and exactly, because we've known each other for 5 or 6 years, and you're that far ahead of me in
we've known each other much longer than that, darling.
Well, so see, this is the thing I love it.
Down here for like, I got down here in 2014, so you were definitely coming. Can you remember when you started?
It would have been it would have probably been about 2015. No, I think it was after Louisa got her diagnosis. So it would have been 2016, 17, something like that.
Okay. So yeah, it's definitely more than 5 years. It feels like, I mean, I'll never forget the t-shirt you got
Oh,
me,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
everyone needs a little bit of what the fuck in their lives. I was like, wow, this is just brilliant.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well,
sorry, I digress. You carry
no,
on.
no. Yeah, I highly recommend checking it out, even if it is just as a, I'm going to bounce off that and have some other lessons elsewhere, but being aware that Rosanna exists and is doing this work, and buy the book, even just for the glossary, re-educate or expand our vocabulary or understanding of the language that's being used so that it doesn't freak us out. I highly recommend that. Thank you so much for giving me this time and sharing your incredible perspective and channeling and teachings with everybody listening to this. It is a joy for me. So thank you very much. And thank you very much to everybody for listening. As always, if you would like to get in touch, if you have any comments about this episode or any other episode, best way to get in touch is via email. It is handsupifyou'rehuman@gmail.com. Please share the episode, subscribe to the podcast, rate and review it, send it to anybody. Just send it to everybody. Just share these kind of interesting, challenging conversations, because I think it is where we start creating change. Rosanna, thank you so much.
So I just want to say, I love being in your energy. I love seeing how your light has switched on. It's such a joy to be part of that activation. And, it's really good to see you where you are right now. I'm really, like, it sounds awful to say I'm really proud of you, but you know what I mean? Like, it's so good to see just how you've grown, like we're all doing this, we're all supporting each other. So thank you for creating this space and this opportunity. It's just a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that very much. And with that, I wish you all a joyful and peaceful few days, and I will speak to you soon. Take care.